Hello and welcome to the Federal. In this special edition, we'll do a quick analysis of the 22-minute crisp address to the nation made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in which he enunciated India's policy against terrorism. He drew new red lines and made it clear that the current ceasefire was just a pause. If there were more acts of terror enacted on the Indian soil, the nation would simply strike back in a way in the same manner as we saw in the last 4 or 5 days. To discuss this and more, I'm joined by my colleague Puneet Nicholas Yadav. Puneet, what do you make of PM's speech? What's your first observations? What are the new
Uh,
red lines he seemed to have drawn in India's war against terror?
well, I think you were right. It's a very crisp 22-minute speech, unlike what we've become used to, from the Prime Minister, the long, rambling speeches. It was just 22 minutes. He did not canvass a lot of politics in his speech, but he highlighted three main things which sort of, in his view, will now guide India's engagement with Pakistan moving forward. And he's outlined the three of them very crisply. One, of course, being that talks and which is a reiteration of his earlier stand that talks and terror cannot go together. India no longer hyphenates the Pakistani state with the Pakistani terror infrastructure. It sees both of them as one. And so any future engagement with Pakistan will be based on the understanding or on based on Pakistan keeping the assurance given. He said while
No,
agreeing to a
I think
ceasefire.
no. Puneet, let's take it
Yeah,
one by one. I think
yeah,
there are many things which he said. Let's take one by one. The
yeah,
first thing he said, it's almost like like India has a very clear nuclear doctrine, where you have
yeah.
watched no first strike policy. Similarly, it seems that there is some kind of a policy now which he has described that how to deal with terror. See, there has been a gradual, if we have to use the same military term, escalation ladder. You see how India has been dealing with terror one after another in the last few years. The first, we just struck at, the terror camps. That was the first one. The second one was Balakot, where went inside Pakistan and struck at some, in Balakot at their camp. And the third this time is not just the camps. We also, in the POK, but also gone into heart of Pakistan in the Punjab province and try to, and have attacked at least two important headquarters. One of LET, Lashkar-e-Taiba, the other, the second one, another terror
Yeah,
this thing,
Jaish-e-Mohammed. Yeah,
Jaish-e-Mohammed. These two we have attacked. So I think what today, first thing he tried to say was that if there were any more attacks on the Indian soil, which is kind of triggered by Pakistan, we will get back and pay in the same coin, and we won't just stop at our borders. We'll enter into Pakistan and do that, and we won't just stop at that, because all along we have been saying the 9 targets which we took on day one, which India took, described the 9 targets in Pakistan, they were only terror camps. But there is an additional element here today. Besides the terror camps, those who are backing or the sponsors, in a way, since we've been constantly calling us, there are enough proof of state-sponsored terrorism. And one latest example is the way the Pakistan dealt with those who, supposed to be the terrorists who had died by Indian strikes, the last strikes that were performed, where many Pakistani generals were seen. So that even they won't be spared. In a way, I think the policy today says that we would strike back at terror. We'll also strike at the sponsors of terror. So I think that's a very important outline. But while he's saying so, then he went on to the nuclear blackmail. You can go on that. Yeah.
yeah. So that's the other point. because there has been a lot of speculation in the media over the last few days from both sides, Pakistan as well as India, on whether the ceasefire was put into effect because India targeted a nuclear site in Pakistan, or whether Pakistan feared or threatened a nuclear strike at India.
Yeah,
Both
so I will
narratives
come to
have
the
been
first
going
one.
on.
The
Yeah,
first narrative today, when a question was raised in the DGMO or DG Air Operation,
yeah,
Director General of Air Operation today, at a press conference, he very clearly denied that India did not.
yes.
He in fact said that we didn't know any such place when it was a specific question was asked. Okay, yeah, go on.
Yeah. So it is in that context that I think his second point assumes significance, where he said that any kind of nuclear blackmail will not work with India any longer. If we have to strike, we are going to strike uh, whenever and if ever Pakistan breaches its assurances given while ordering the current ceasefire.
Yeah, so he made it very clear. He used the word for us, terrorists and its backers are one and the same. That's a very clear point which he made. Then the other thing which he said, which let's come to that, in which he made three things very clear: that terror and talk. There have been thing that there's another thing which was said that today the DGMO met. They perhaps took the operational aspects into consideration, but the long-term talks. But there was a mention that in Rubio's note that India and Pakistan will meet at some other point. I think today that was made clear what the kind of agenda of those discussions could be. He made it very clear terror and talk won't go together. So terror and trade won't go together. Water and blood won't go together. So what he meant to say was that if at all there is any discussion with India and Pakistan, if India holds any talks, it would only be on terrorism. It would only be on Pak-occupied Kashmir, and it won't be on trade or water, Indus Water Treaty or treaties like that. So I think that's another very, very clear point which he made. The next question, which many people are asking, why, if India had an upper hand, how did this entire ceasefire came about? Why did India agree for a ceasefire when, after 3 or 4 days of operations, we were having an upper hand?
Yeah, so
Puneet.
this is where I think it gets tricky for the Prime Minister, because the last 11 years he has cultivated an image of a strong man, of a man with a very, very muscular policy against terrorism. And I think a huge section of his support base was very disappointed. We could see that from the reactions on social media, on TV channels, when India announced this, or rather, before India, the US President Donald Trump announced that India and Pakistan had agreed to a ceasefire. And so a lot of questions were being raised. And even at the DGMO press conference, journalists raised this question and asked Lieutenant General Rajiv Ghai, the DGMO, on why India had agreed to a ceasefire when clearly, as per the government, as per the DGMOs in India, we had the upper hand. So the DGMO, of course, had said that he alluded to agreeing to the ceasefire because on grounds that our primary target was only the terror infrastructure. It was never the Pakistani military. And once that was done, whatever happened, whatever strikes we launched were essentially to counter the Pakistani escalation. So ceasefire happened because Pakistan asked for it. The Prime Minister has sort of taken that a step forward by saying Pakistan went pleading to the world and came
Yeah.
pleading to our
So,
DGMO.
yeah, I think
So,
before you complete, something else happened in between.
yeah,
India attacked terror, the schools of terror. or the college or university of terror in Pakistan. It hit at various spots. That was our objective. But Pakistan retaliated by attacking Indian civilians and also Indian military establishment. When that happened, then India struck back at their installations. And that's when it became a kind of configuration. And when that happened, after 2 or 3 days, India was on the top, as Indian government and Indian military, everybody claimed. We all seemed to be on the top. What happened that suddenly the ceasefire came? And that's the question I think we need to answer.
Yeah. So, and that is why I think, as I said, that this is where it gets tricky for the Prime Minister to sell the ceasefire to, of course, the country at large, but specifically to large sections of his own support base, because it kind of chips away at his no nonsense, zero tolerance to terror, zero tolerance towards Pak aggression, to that narrative. And it also comes at a time when, in fact, the Prime Minister's address to the nation, shortly before that, you had US President Donald Trump once again jumping the gun and saying that he practically threatened India and Pakistan into agreeing for a ceasefire by saying, if you do not agree to a ceasefire, US is going to cut off all trade with you. So, uh, now that, of course, is something the Prime Minister hasn't addressed at all in his speech today. But he has instead tried to assuage those who feel that India shouldn't have agreed to a ceasefire by saying that the ceasefire is only on the understanding and that the assurances given by Pakistan that we are not going to allow any terror directed at India from our soil, or even military action from our soil against India. And
Yeah, I
so
think
that
that's a
is,
very important point. I think
yeah,
what this is very important. What he's trying to say is that Pakistan went to the global community crying, unable to, because it was unable to face the pressure which came from Indian Air Force and the strikes that were happening on its strategic installations. And then, as a response, when the global community perhaps try to meet, I know I won't use the word mediate. Got, I mean, I don't know which way it happened, whether they communicated these things to India, where and a certain assurance, like you said, use the word assurance, or a promise or whatever was made. That's when India said, okay, we are, and then the DGMO, Pakistan called DGMO India. That's when it was agreed that, okay, we could go for this is a kind of a narrative that has come from his speech today.
yes, that's right.
Yeah. So that's the other, because as you correctly said, that he had a strong man image. He has, and he certainly want to give a certain communication to the people at large, specifically to his own supporters, political supporters within India. So I think these two, three things came through very, very clearly. Then there was a next issue which he took up, that you know these surgical strikes, air strikes, or other things are just a pause. If need be, if
That's
any
right.
such situation arises, India is ready to face any situation. The forces have been kept on alert all the time. I think that's the kind of a thing which he was trying to make, that, okay, don't think it is all halted once again, because the question was, what happens next now? Has this particular strike created enough deterrence that there won't be any more strikes on the Indian soil? So I think, in a way, a new red line has been drawn, where Pakistan has been clearly told that next time, if such terror strike happens on India, there would be retribution, and it would happen maybe this in this manner, or much more intense way. I mean, that's the kind of a thing he left open. Um, the other thing which is very important is, you know, the global connections which he tried to make in his speech, didn't he?
Yeah, he talked about how Bahawalpur and Muridke, the JEM and LET headquarters had one way or the other covert or overt linkages to the London tube blasts, to 9/11. And so I think what he was trying to convey was that the world needs to understand that it's not just India that is suffering because of terror emanating from Pakistani soil, but the world at large. And so perhaps he wanted to tell the world that when we targeted these nine terror or military terror infrastructure, terror universities, as he called them, uh, we were actually doing the world a service. Perhaps that is the message that he was trying to convey. Uh, you
Yeah.
know,
Here is a thing which is very important, that for long the West and United States have kind of bracketed us with Pakistan. Pakistan, India were hyphenated. All those leaders who would first visit India will make a halt in Pakistan and then go. Anything which relates to India, they will also talk about Pakistan. I think all this kind of change after 9/11, where in some ways the West, specifically America, understood that there was a lot of state sponsored terrorism that was being made on Pakistani soil. The one of the biggest examples is Osama bin Laden, which was hidden in their backyard, which US discovered. But despite all this, in this entire episode, for a moment, it appeared as if is United States once again trying to hyphenate India with Pakistan. Do you think that particular issue has been dispelled here?
I don't think so, because if you go through whatever the US president has been saying, I think it lands Prime Minister Modi in a very tough spot, at least internationally. You also have to see how the international media has reported on the current escalation. And I think that is one area that continues to remain one area of concern for Mr. Modi's government on how to basically convince the world leaders, and particularly the West, that whatever actions India took were not just in India's interest but in the interest of the world. And I think that's a narrative that he will try to push very hard. At least that is what I could pick up from his speech today, aside from the fact that he was constantly trying to assuage his own support base, as well as sort of salvage or bolster, whichever way you want to look at it, his own strongman image.
Right. I think particularly the international media has, instead of focusing on terror and the sufferings of India, which is what the principal objective of Indian government has been, I think managed to focus more on the you see the industrial the complex, the defense industrial complex, and the viability of West versus Chinese equipments, and whether India was a testing ground for those. I think the narrative in a way slipped into that, and that's been one kind of a failure in the government in kind of uh, bringing back international community to the issue that we have been victims of terror the same way as US been after 9/11. uh, Thank you, Puneet, for this brief discussion. We'll do
Thank
more.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.